Yes, we are back. What's going on, sis?
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
I'm so glad to be back on this space again. I like miss these conversations when we have our week off.
Yeah, I'm glad that we're choosing to do this. We had a busy week. We had a busy month last month with our guests, right?
We we did. It was a lot. It was emotionally draining too. It was a lot to have those conversations. I don't think I'd be taking that into consideration.
Yeah, so I want to welcome our audience back. I'm Henry Lucas. I'm president of Kentucky Harm Reduction Coalition.
And I'm Shreeta Walden. I am the executive director here at Kentucky Harm Reduction Coalition. Hey y'all.
How long we been doing this podcast now?
Since February officially.
Of this year, right? So what is that, like 5 months?
Yes.
Yeah. And I was thinking about our last episode and all the difficulties we had with on the tech side of things, and I wanted to just give a little bit of airtime to the audience and just thank them for hanging in there with us. We're 5 months into this podcast. It's been such an enriching gift, I know, in my life and in our relationship and in the organization. Um, and so, I don't want to apologize for anything that's outside of my control, but I am so grateful that our audience is hanging in there and demonstrating compassion and understanding as we continue to sort through some of the random technical issues that we have from time to time.
Absolutely. I think that's perfect. I'm sending out links so everybody can join too as we're doing that. We absolutely appreciate everybody's patience as we get more and more comfortable with this space. Unlike other podcasts, we are doing this live and unfiltered, meaning there's no us doing the taping and then go back and do the editing. We haven't gotten that yet. That's an old jazzy setup. It costs a little bit more money, so we definitely need you all to keep those donations coming. But this is live.
Yeah.
We're doing it right now in real time. So when things happen, when the power goes down, it's happening in real time. So we do appreciate you all's patience and grace as we navigate this.
And we're learning as a team. We're learning as we go. Shout out to our behind the scenes team. Ryan, who is project manager, who's largely, managing the platform and all the tech stuff with our podcast, our social media strategist, Sarah. Shout out to her for always being present and always ready to, share what we're doing with the greater community and with the greater world. None of this will be possible without all the people behind the scenes. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you guys. So before we get started, we want to share about a couple of things. First up, we got our kid making party for this month. Yes, it is July 18th. It's on the screen. We are collaborating with her, helping evolve recovery. These are an amazing group of individuals who have walked the line of recovery. Hint, hey, Henry, hint to what we'll be talking about today. Look, I saw that on the Family Guy episode. Okay, you guys, not going down that rabbit hole. But yes, helping Evolve Recovery, absolutely amazing organization. So glad that we'll be working with them. Our kid making party is a little different. It starts at 11 o'clock this time. So 11 to 2 on Friday, July 18th. We will be at 26 and Broadway. So come ready to make hits with us, learn more about our organization, learn more about the exciting opportunities we have for you to join us on this journey and become a volunteer, become a donor, a sustainability donor, get to meet our leaders and some of our team members, and even the folks that are doing behind the scenes will be present to learn about what they do for the organization, right?
Yeah.
What else we got next, Henry?
Well, hang on one second. If you're a small organization, a medium sized or big organization, and you're looking for ways to give back to the community, um, and you have that as one of your operational items to do quarterly or annually, we partner primarily with organizations of all sizes so that we can receive the help
Mhm.
and also give back to the greater community. One of our pillars is to educate, and the kit making parties are such a great time. If you're a community member and you're looking at ways that you want to get more involved in the community to have an impact, this is such a low barrier, low impact way. You saw the flyer. It's a 3 hour commitment. You can stay as long or as little as you would like and meet some folks that are really out in the trenches, out in the streets, that are doing this harm reduction work. So
Cool.
next
Next up.
next up, hey, we're on the same wavelength. Next up, we've got September 12th. Shreeta and I will be co-facilitating radical inclusion, meeting people where they are, leading through the lens of harm reduction at the sixth annual Kentucky Association of Addiction Professionals Conference in Lexington, Kentucky. It's going to be a great time with a lot of professionals, community members. It's such a big lineup. We've got Jeff Wilson, who's an expert. We've got my good friend and colleague, Mike Iden, who's going to be talking about the dysfunctional family system. We've
Mm,
got we have pioneers like Karen Haskell, who's I think the president of the Kentucky Board of Alcohol Drug Counselors.
mhm.
If I remember that correctly, we're going to have just a lot of experts there, a lot of good people presenting valuable evidence based information, and we'd love to see you there. So
Awesome. So please, you guys, can you like, share, and subscribe to our podcast? It helps us spread the word. We have been having members join our podcast, join the audience far and wide. We're talking about Philadelphia, New York, DC, um, Missouri. We got folks joining. We want to make sure that everyone can join these conversations and engage with us. So please like and share, and please subscribe so that you're always aware when we are showing up on this screen. All right, ready to jump in?
yeah, so last month
Mm-hmm.
we covered a lot about prevention,
Mm-hmm.
uh, harm reduction through the lens of prevention. We had hey Evan, good to see you. We've got friends checking in from Denver. Uh,
Yes.
don't be surprised, Evan, if we talk about psychedelics at some point today as innovative harm reduction approach. And we had folks join us, plenty of guests join us, last month talking about prevention primarily. And then this month, July, we've got a completely different topic and theme for the month. What's that, Shrita?
Freedom, liberation, and recovery. I told you all the word recovery was going to be on there. That makes me excited. I like that in movies and shows too. But yes, we're going to it's organic. It feels natural to move into this direction. We talked about prevention. Now, let's hop into this idea and concept of recovery. So, before we even get started, Henry, can you share what your personal definition is of recovery?
Yeah, this is identify as a survivor of the opioid crisis, and this December 22nd will be 17 years of abstinence from opioids.
Yes.
Um, and that day, it changed my life. And I look back over the 17 years and where I was and where I'm at now. This idea of recovery has evolved. Recovery is a very flexible word. I think so much of the language that we use is very rigid. It's
Mm,
very black or white, yes or no. It either is or it isn't. And what I'm realizing when I understand myself more and when I get the chance to understand other people more, how it's just such more of a fluid word and concept. You
Mm-hmm.
know, for me, I see recovery as more of a it's a lifestyle, right? It's not just like okay, I'm this opiate using teenager or 20 something, and I stop using or I go to treatment or and my story is I went to treatment. I look at like my overall well-being in my life, and it's not just like substance use is where the only dysfunction was.
Mm-hmm.
I also look at things like finances. I look at my physical health. I look at my sexual health and my sexual orientation.
Mm-hmm.
At my occupational strengths. I look at all of these different domains. And that's a big coffee cup. I couldn't even see that and nothing behind you. Just saw a big circle.
I know. I saw myself disappear. I'm sorry.
What you doing drinking out of a bucket for?
Oh Lord. Okay.
And
Sorry.
that better be look. That better be water at this point. Nah, you still drinking on. Look, you still drinking on coffee from Tuesday. That's what that is. Um, and I'm glad because this is also a part of recovery, like not taking things so serious and
Yeah.
finding humor and lightheartedness and being playful. And I never knew anything about that. I mean, my life was
Mm,
just so serious when I was caught up in this survival way of thinking about every aspect, of my life. And I can't think about like this lifestyle of recovery without discovery.
mm,
Like recovery, there has to be an element of discovery in recovery. I have to begin to like discover, and we're going to have a wonderful guest on in a couple of weeks. I had to look at my strengths.
yeah.
I had to look at my assets, the qualities. I had to look at where I was maladaptive, where I was like switching up. I had to look at where a lot of times I spent my life being who I thought you wanted me, to be.
Mm,
And so I really had to, to rediscover and maybe for the first time discover parts of myself that I didn't even know existed. And that helps with like awareness and it helps with like insight, because again, like recovery is not a 30-day process. Recovery is not an event. Like recovery, I think for every person, it's a lifelong journey.
mm,
And in a way to look at it too, just simply, we're all recovering,
mm,
right? We're all recovering from our programming. We're recovering from our conditioning. We're recovering from the subtle ways that we've been denied our authenticity.
mm,
Like we're all really trying to figure out just how to come back to ourselves, the essence of ourselves. And sometimes it's changing up who I'm hanging out with. It's changing up people to believe in me, people that want to see me do good, people that are cheering me. Like
mm,
last week is a good example. I don't have anything figured out in my life. I was kind of going through um, some anguish, mental anguish last week. It was all made up in my head. But I reached out to you, Shrita, because I see you as being just a valuable resource in my life, somebody that's going to tell me straight up how it is, but also give me the other side of that, which is love and compassion. I need that. I haven't always had that. I didn't grow up with that. And so that's a part of my recovery, and that wouldn't have happened if I didn't discover that I am worthy of love. If I didn't discover that I am deserving of mutual relationships, you know,
mm-hmm,
I had to discover so that I could get into some sense of recovery, whatever that meant, for me.
mm.
So, what are your thoughts on recovery? And if it's true, we're all recovering from something. What is it that you're recovering from?
I and thank you for sharing that. and a lot of what you said resonates with me. For me, yes, recovery is very inclusive of so many parts. I'm recovering from systemic oppression and generational harms that have been inflicted on our community, harms that I've experienced and has impacted me through life, through my career. There are so many parts of me that have taken in trauma from childhood on up. And my reaction, my behavior, how I respond in relationships, all of these experiences I've endured impact the way that I move through life. What I really discovered over the last few years is this idea that I had to show up in spaces in a certain way for other people, which is, and you see it trending, all of you all in the audience, you see a lot of this, like, don't diminish who you are. It's so much easier to say those things because I think we like to say trendy words and slogans, but do we really embrace that? So for me and my recovery and healing journey, that's what recovery looks like to me, is healing. So it's a constant process. It's a process of accepting what I now can see that's not hidden anymore in those secret parts of myself, accepting those things and deciding what I'm going to do with that now. Am I going to hold on to this or am I going to release it and let go? And if I'm holding on to it, what else am I doing with it? Does
Yeah.
it still serve a purpose for me? So recovery is this constant journey of healing that I experience in liberation.
Yeah.
My brain had to accept that first before I can work on liberating the physical. So everything on the outside of me, community wise, myself, before I could do that, I had to liberate my mind.
Yeah.
And that's a part of my recovery.
Yeah. Well, I'm big on and thank you for that, sis. I could totally, I could totally relate. Um, I think the hardest prison to live in is a prison of the mind. You know, and and that's the thing. Like we all have to look in the mirror.
Mm,
You know, and most people avoid that. And it's like before we can like move on, there are some hard truths that we'll all have to accept.
hmm
You know, but that's the part of putting it down and creating space and making room for something else, right? And so I went to Webster's, not Webster, not but I went to Webster's,
Okay.
and I wanted to know what Webster says about the word recovery, the idea, the concept of recovery, and it gives three definitions. I'm going to read all three of them. They're short, but I think they all apply. Okay.
hmm
So the first one is a return to a normal state of health, mind, or strength. Yeah. The action or process of regaining possession or control of something stolen or lost.
Mm,
I'll add in there or give away.
mm,
Action or process of regaining possession or control of something stolen, lost, or given away.
mm.
And then the last one I thought was really unique, the process of removing or extracting an energy source.
Oh, I like that one. So when you read the definitions though, how did we get to abstinence being the because my mind went, wait a minute. Now we done talked about healing. Those definitions actually align with what we're talking about. Transformation, healing, energy, extracting an energy source that one actually is the one I'm probably gonna take for myself. I love that. How did we get there, Henry? How did we get recovery means abstinence? How do we move away from the definitions that Webster been around long enough?
Well, I think if we go back to the very early times of uh, treatment, it was primarily alcohol, and it was primarily pioneered by Alcoholics Anonymous, which I'm grateful for, and I know has helped a lot of people. And I'm also mindful of the consequences and the negative impact that AA has had
Mm-hmm.
on so many people too. And a lot of the language in 1935, when these ideas were written, it was about entire abstinence.
Mm-hmm.
Harm reduction is not at that time. Harm reduction wasn't necessarily a thing. A harm reduction was a frontal lobotomy, right? But we've evolved to this very moment. Last 90 years. I think too. A lot of our religious values have um, overshadowed this idea of what recovery from substance use could look like. And in fact, a program like Alcoholics Anonymous was largely influenced by the Oxford Group, which was a Christian based organization, uh,
Mm.
very rich in those old Puritan values. And that our culture, nonetheless, our culture is saturated in those values. But what might be good for one person may not be good for the next.
Right.
And it's not an event, it's a process. This recovery is a process. And everybody is exactly where they need to be. And what I've found out that if people feel empowered and accept where they're at, they will almost always, if not always, make the very best, most healthiest choice for themselves. Even if that means they're not injecting drugs anymore, they're smoking it. It may not be abstinence, but when we look in the substance abuse field or we look at the industry, there's really like two schools of thought: abstinence, harm reduction.
Mm-hmm.
Abstinence, harm reduction. So, out of those two schools of thought, who really owns the right and the privilege to this idea of recovery?
Mm.
The truth is, no one does, right? It's going to be whatever we make it out to be,
Mm.
you know?
I
So,
think that Sarah might have to keep this cut this part and make a little what is it, snapshot video of that very good explanation. And I think people who work in this field deserve to really hear that frame, right? Hear the framing from listen to those definitions all the way out to this explanation was
but we
perfect.
say, let me go back, right? And I'm grateful for abstinence based
Mm-hmm.
treatment and recovery. Okay. I mean, it saved my life. I also recognize the impact that it's had on other people. Okay. So, what's necessarily helpful for me may not be helpful to anybody else. And I'm okay with that. But it's like really interesting and remind me because my mind just went somewhere as I said it. What was the last thing that you said? Do you remember?
Just I was saying that when you
Oh yeah, yeah, I got
okay,
it.
okay,
Okay.
okay.
So we talk about abstinence, right? But what is it abstinent from? Because I know a lot of people that are in an abstinence based recovery, okay, and they're not using fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, or not using alcohol. They stopped using cannabis,
Mm-hmm.
but they still use nicotine. They're still addicted to sugar and
Mm-hmm.
carbs and caffeine, you know. And so it's like, but who gets to decide? Because obviously, people that are in an abstinence-based process or abstinence-based recovery, they may not be using their drug of choice, and I'm air quoting that because
Yeah,
that's not my language. They may not be using their drug of choice, but
right.
they're still using something to get that dopamine hit.
Yep.
So again, like who am I to decide what this concept is for the next person? That's why education and discovery is so important, because I finally can get to a place to decide for myself, what my process is. No one can decide that for me.
Yeah. I think that, again, like I said, this is huge because I've been hearing so much from community members, and I've shared this live to certain folks that I hope hop on, or maybe later in the week they will be able to go back and revisit this conversation. But Henry, there's a lot of people who are moving away from some of the recovery spaces that have been identified over the last decade of providing care for people with substance use disorder. Um, there's a lot of anger and frustration because the recovery community seems to be so divided, especially when we talk about the rooms of AA and NA, mostly AA. Because before even coming into this space doing this work, I recall a lot of people going into an AA space and not being able to share authentically about all their use. So they would have to go find another space because they didn't feel like they could show up authentically. So I think this is just a really important conversation. I plan to share it over the next week too, again, because there's a lot of people that follow us that work in this field who are
Yeah.
starting to that are very troubled by this, and have their own biases and things that they don't quite have a space. They don't have a space to really unpack this right now.
Well, and the founder of AA last century was one of the, I think, Times top 100 most influential, people, and he died sober from alcohol,
Hmm.
but emphysema killed him because he was a heavy cigarette smoker, and he suffered from severe depression, severe, not this I don't like myself kind of thing, woe
Right.
is me, not this clinical depression. He suffered from. He was a veteran of from World War One, and he suffered from what they called then shell shock,
Hmm.
which is now PTSD.
Right.
And I forget the year, but I want to say it was maybe the early 50s.
Hmm.
He experimented with LSD, lysergic acid diethylamide, which
Good
is
job.
a psychedelic.
Good job. Because I cannot, I will not try to pronounce LSD. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Um, and he experimented with it as his attempt to recreate this spiritual experience, which he
Mm,
believed is really what liberates people from the grips of alcoholism, right?
mm,
And I would agree in a sense that we do have to have a radical shift in how we think, how we feel, and how we see the world. But it may not necessarily be a burning bush experience. It might be, watching one leaf catch on fire at a time. But he wanted to introduce LSD, and this is all in the archives and the history of AA and Bill
mhm,
Wilson's, documentary. He wanted to introduce LSD to AA,
mm,
and AA being a nonprofit, they have a board, and the board ultimately makes the shots for the organization, right?
mhm,
And so when he went to the board, they denied it.
mm.
They were afraid of what it might do
People.
in contaminating the sort of purest value and the purest look and perspective that something like AA had. And so now here we are again in what they're calling uh, the second psychedelic renaissance, and we're seeing a lot of studies from John Hopkins. We're seeing a lot of studies from other companies. on something like psilocybin, magic mushrooms, and we're seeing how effective it is for nicotine cessation and how effective it is for alcohol use disorder.
Mm.
We're seeing our folks in Texas largely being pushed by our friend Brian Hubbard in using ibogaine,
Yes.
which is a plant medicine from West Africa, as a way of treating, curing, and eradicating PTSD, traumatic brain injury, and opiates. And there's some efficacy in it being a potential treatment for any compulsive disorder. This is, these are things that are backed by data. It's backed by science, right? So it's an interesting time that we're living in when we talk about recovery and we talk about abstinence and we talk about harm reduction. And we had a Demi Lovato, I think, came out a few years ago and said that she's like Cali sober.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't use any substance, but I think it was Demi Lovato or somebody. um, they just use cannabis.
Mm.
you know so what are your thoughts on some of this that I've mentioned, and what
Well, you jumped into a lot for our viewers. So I'm gonna slow back, roll this tape back a little bit. There was a
Roll it back.
there was a question um, that talked about for our discussion. What does it mean to recover your freedom, your voice, your agency? It's connected to everything you said. And when I thought about that question, and it started actually, the question kept popping up like, this is freedom. This is my agency. You know, being able to have self determination, which in Swahili and for Kwanzaa, the second day of Kwanzaa is Kuji Chagalia. And I practice Kuji Chagalia intentionally throughout the year, which means self determination. Being able to have agency and have self determination and say, I'm going to walk into an office where a healer, a practitioner, a clinical person, a doctor is going to listen to me and say, I don't want to go into just this treatment program because you identified as something I need. I want you to hear me out. I want you to see my experience, see who I am, and we try to find what works for me. So no, I don't want to be on methadone. I don't want Suboxone. I want to try to figure out a holistic way. Oh, okay. That's recovery as freedom. It's saying it's us meeting people where they're at and saying, well, this is what is provided here. An example I have, Henry, that I've been using lately with a lot of folks is we have come so far with reproductive health. When I was 15 and 16 and I got on birth control, and for all you nosy folks know, it wasn't because I was out there being a hot pants. Maybe I was. But that's none of your business. I'm a changed and recovered woman now. I'm swearing. But listen, I remember going into the doctor's office and they had the pill, all the other medications at that time. And my mom was a police officer, Chicago police officer, great insurance, right? All the other medications were still coming out and they were tiered. So what I was able to get and qualify for was the pill. Fast forward that to when my daughter, I took her to the doctor and we were looking, I said, I want her to be on birth control. Henry, they pulled out the buffet. Wait a minute, I'm not just talking about the pill. I'm talking about the implant in the arm. I'm talking about the T. I don't know all the names, but you're talking about 10 different types. And as I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh. So I start getting interested. And I'm like, so what do you think about the device that goes inside? And she was like, you know what? For her age group, she's going through. Why can't we be that way, Henry? Like, why having someone sit down and actually say, if you want to work with your clinician, your therapist who's trained to work with ketamine, Like, yes, you may have seen the negative messaging around substances because all drugs are bad, right? That's the messaging that, especially in communities of color, you start talking about psilocybin mushrooms. They go, I ain't dealing with all that. That's some drugs. Well, wait a minute. Reframing this to plant based medicine, that's really what we're talking about. And acknowledging that through the failed war on drugs, the pharmaceutical company was the biggest dope dealer out here. Like, that's who killed the most people. So I'm sitting here like, liberation, freedom, recovery is about having a buffet. It's a buffet. Hey, you know what? Abstinence is absolutely a part of this journey because I'm abstaining from the energy source that does not serve me anymore, right? I'm abstaining from something that I found harmful. It's being able to have a buffet of options that align with who I am. And that's what I feel when I looked at that question, like the freedom, my voice. That's taking my voice into account. That's taking my thoughts about how I feel about myself. I feel like, I'm gonna be honest, let me get all the way 100 with you. I feel like the way we were taught in this field was to assume and project that our clients don't know what they're talking about, that our clients don't know what they need. Like, I feel like when I walked out into the field, especially coming from Chicago, and I remember my first alcohol and drug counselors were all street, like one of them name was Killer. Now you all take that where you want, but his name was Killer. You you leave out of here, you gonna die. You don't know what you want. Stop thinking for yourself. Like, it was like, wait a minute. What you mean they don't know what they want? They've lived 20 some years without us. Can we learn about versus who they are and what they do know about themselves and find out what it is they really want for themselves? I feel like we just did such a disservice that now we're discovering what client centered really means.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I was listening to you, I was like, the idea for people to, you know, be given options. How do you think that impacts people in the carceral system? How do you think that impacts people in systems that grew up in child protective service, like that have been oppressed for so long, being able to have an option on what their journey, their health care, their health improving journey would look like? How,
Well,
go ahead.
yeah, and you know the so think about this buffet of options that are out there for anything, reproductive health or
Hmm.
opioid use disorder treatment or um, it's important because one of our basic human rights, at least in this country, is called informed consent. Most people go into places to receive some kind of help, and it's uninformed consent
Hmm.
because they're not given the whole buffet of options. They're only given what the practitioner likes to eat.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying?
Mm.
Because what you're talking about liberation, there is no greater freedom than the freedom of choice.
Yes.
And we can't have freedom of choice if we're uninformed, right? It'd be like it's like me having a gluten allergy and me going to this buffet and I don't know that the breading on the fish has gluten in it, and so I get it and I eat it and then I end up getting sick. And all it took was a little sign right above the fish saying, gluten
Mm.
or breading has gluten or whatever whatever the language is. And so we can do better.
Yeah.
But we can do better as professionals, I think, overall, at really creating opportunities for folks to make the best informed decision for themselves. Because, like, what does it mean about me if I'm all caught up and feeling some type of way about a decision that you're making for your life?
Right. Right.
Right? Like somehow I know what's better for someone that even looks like me, even the same
Mhm.
age as me, same background as me. Like somehow, like I know what's going to be best for them. Now I might have a general idea that this direction over here might be, but to just go ahead and directly streamline them into some process is dehumanizing.
It is.
It's cutting somebody's legs off before they can learn how to stand up for themselves. So we have to start at the basics really with all of this because I have a monopoly on my recovery. I decide what it looks like. And in my own journey, I've had to learn things the hard way. I've had a lot of nights of crying. I've had to let go of some relationships, people that I once loved and believed in, and that were mentors. But I had to let people go because that's just part of my evolution and my recovery process.
Yeah. Your evolution. Yeah. I agree. I think the one thing I've enjoyed about working in harm reduction specifically, about really centering this work, even as a clinician, is the idea that harm reduction provides the support for us to really be intentional about our work. Like it's both and it's involved, right? It's not an either or. And I think as I came into this work, even in the harm reduction spaces, talking to other harm reductionists who do not have these licenses that I have, that they have lived experience, there was definitely a feeling of, well, you guys do this over there. And I'm like, no, actually we all work together. It's an ecosystem. Without this doesn't work. And maybe that's why we've seen, if we take a look at it, maybe that's why we've seen so many deaths,
Yeah.
is because we've been trying to operate separately for so long and it doesn't work like that.
Well, if one way of looking at it is abstinence is actually on the harm reduction continuum, it's not its own thing.
Right.
So, for those of you practicing abstinence based recovery, thank you for showing us that harm reduction works,
There it is.
right? I mean, it's not its own thing. It's one piece on that whole continuum of harm reduction.
Mm-hmm.
It's no different. Someone choosing to abstain from a substance is no different than someone who decides to go from injecting fentanyl to a daily methadone regimen.
Right.
Like they're making in that moment they're making the best choice for themselves on where they're at,
Absolutely.
which is commendable for anybody,
Yep.
right? It's hard to to go from drinking to abstaining. It's hard from going from injecting to taking something orally. Like it's hard, and here's harm reduction too. Like it's hard going from smoking cigarettes to vaping,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's hard. So why do we feel the need to make it any more hard or any more justifiable or any more deserving than like what we already are? And that's like that's what we're claiming.
Mm-hmm.
As what's going on, Odell? Like I'm deserving, I'm worthy to make any choice that I feel is the best choice for me right now where I'm at in my life. Now, 5 years from now, I may not still be on methadone.
Right.
5 years from now, I might be on a higher dose of methadone or a lower dose. But none of that really matters if it's someone who is in the process of recovery.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I as I think about the both and concept, I've been exploring my relationship to substance over years. And it's health wise, it's health promoted. When I'm dealing with different health issues, I'm like, this might be a result of some of the substances I use, right? And when I think about harm reduction for me and my own experience, it's been I wouldn't say it's easy. It's a much more, I guess it makes me, it's a much more motivating way, I think, for myself, to look at my health
Yep.
holistically. Like it's a different way. And an example I was sharing with some of my girlfriends. I was like, it's funny. The doctors will give you your little alcohol assessment. What is it? I can't remember what it's called, the short survey or whatever. And I'll be laughing every time I look at it. I'm like, people be lying all the time on this, y'all. Y'all not catching nothing, but because we know how to work a system. I fill it out and they never flag anything as a substance use disorder or alcoholism. You know what happened? My A1C was getting high. Two, look, my locks then fell out because they like, yep. Two readings from my blood work showed my A1C elevated. So you know who started the discussion around what I put in my body? Me. Because my doctors, again, they look at the survey, they look at stuff, they're like, oh, you're healthy. And I'm like, but am I really? Because you waiting for me to get on to develop diabetes so now I can purchase some more medication from the legal drug pusher. Like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. So what we started talking about is I actually kind of pressed her. My Norton's my chart. If I was to expose it, you always see this long conversation. She was like, well, there's nothing really to worry about. I said, nothing to worry about in black. And that means that diabetes there's a higher rate in the black community. Like, lady, come on. So she came back with a list of things that I could do. And you know what was in there? It was wine, sweet wine. I was like, oh shoot. Uh-oh. I used to love me some sweet Marcella. I had to sit with that because I'm like, wait a minute, I like coffee. And everybody in the office, we're now on a restriction here with sugar because of Ryan telling us how many sugar packs me and my colleague Alicia can get. But I'm like, I like coffee. So what was I doing, Henry? I was like, okay, which one am I going to start really working on? Alcohol, I could throw this to the side. I don't need that wine like that, but that coffee right now in my life where I'm at, I want to have my coffee. I want that a part of me. And what I started doing was this, and I said that's harm reduction. I am working on this, but if this was in the setting and the mind frame where we have been, which is very archaic, you have to stop all these things. And I feel like that's where we do fail. Telling people, Ryan said 4 packets a day. That is really what we own in this office. He gonna get us healthy. But we have to start from somewhere. And I feel like that's where we struggle. That's where we throw people off, is because it's this all or nothing approach. When we always talk about that in the clinical setting, having all or nothing approaches, they don't help us, actually hinder us on this journey.
Yeah. And, some people would go to just straight black coffee. And then other people are going to monitor sugar precisely. Somebody else is even going to look for a sugar alternative,
Yes.
and they might even look for a natural alternative
Mhm.
like maple syrup or honey, like pure maple syrup, pure honey. So there's a lot of ways that someone can still enjoy a cup of coffee without going straight black,
Right. But
right?
that idea of how do we shift it? And so shifting where these thought processes come from, I know we were going to talk about, you said something, what did you call it? The
Yeah,
purist idea. We've talked about this a number of times in different, about around different settings and different issues, but I think it's something we should spend a couple of minutes on to help people understand this idea of white supremacy, this purity type of way of moving. I would love for you to share that, because that's a conversation we actually have had a few times, because it's impacted how marginalized communities of color have engaged or disengaged from these treatment programs that are very narrow. So if you could share, Henry, a little bit more on that idea of purity when it comes to this, how it plays into stigma and shame and surveillance and punishment versus healing, transformation, and recovery based on the Webster Dictionary definition.
Well, now we have this term, it's been going around for a few years, where they say all paths to recovery,
Hmm.
right? And that's real interesting because if we go off the definition of recovery, it doesn't require all paths,
Mm.
right? Because recovery by nature is for everyone.
It is.
So when we say all paths to recovery, it's a subtle way that we're actually continuing to um, play into the stigma. You catch that? Do you catch that?
Yeah, all paths.
Right, all paths. So why does any one particular path, and there is no all paths, it's all the path,
Right.
right? But
Right.
we think that it's all this different stuff, and it's like,
Mhm.
well, we have to really justify you people coming here. We
Mhm.
have to sort of justify, why am I sitting next to this person, dot dot dot. Well, it's like
Mhm.
all paths. It's like, and so it doesn't necessarily make any, it doesn't really make any sense to me. It's like we're still gatekeeping in our language,
We are.
right?
Absolutely.
It's not like all paths, it's the path to recovery,
Right.
right? Because if you go into like a hospital and in the recovery room, they don't say, well, this is where everybody recovers from every injury and illness they
It's
have.
the
They don't
recovery
say
room.
that. It's just a recovery room,
Recovery room. Exactly.
right? We don't
Exactly.
say we got the broken legs over there, or
Right.
we got the broken arms over there. People that have COVID are over here. It's like, no, it's like, well, except, yeah, we want to keep
Yeah,
the
we
COVID.
want we want to keep that separate.
Yeah, if you got a communicable, disease or something, yeah. And I'm not making fun of that or joking, but
No.
just to tie in, like the point is, even when we are trying to be considerate and destigmatizing, sometimes it's still stigmatizing,
Mhm.
right? Like, it doesn't need any justification. Recovery doesn't need any justification, doesn't need any explanation.
Right.
So
Right.
let's start there instead of trying to make ourselves feel better about all the years that we've excluded so many people. That's all that is. That's all that is.
Right.
And I'm really sad for the younger version of myself that just didn't
Mhm.
know what I didn't know
Mhm.
early in my process. I'm not going to beat myself up. I'm not going to feel unnecessary, shame, guilt behind it. But again, I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. I that resonates with me, especially when you say you feel sad. I've been talking about grief a lot this year, and I'm in the process of grieving so many pieces of myself, my former self, and yes, my former self as a clinician. Um, didn't know what I didn't know, and I'm glad to know it today. I'm glad to be alive and still able to be a part of this system of care that we're both a part of, to still be able to make an impact
Well, it's like anything. I mean, at one point, you could smoke on airplanes.
in hospitals.
At one point, dads weren't going back to the delivery room with moms, and this wasn't that long ago.
Hmm.
So it's only right, as our consciousness and our consideration, as it grows, right? It's only right, and it's only true that the philosophy just evolves right along with it. So that's what I see, is recovery is really kind of updating to reflect more of what our culture is, and to really be more in line with the times that we're in today. Because there's just a lot of things in our industry, in our field, in healthcare,
Hmm.
it no longer, it just doesn't work.
It doesn't. And I think, as we grow closer to, our time, and we're going to lose our audience from Instagram. We learned today that it cuts off in an hour. So Instagram folks, we will see you again, or you could jump right over to Facebook as we wrap up those last 10 minutes of this episode. But as we move into these final minutes, I think it's important for people to know the how, and what we always gonna come back to when we're talking about the how. Like, okay, I've been in this thought process, Sharita. I'm a clinician. I've been thinking this way. I've been practicing this way. So how do I start moving? And to start moving differently and thinking differently and having the paradigm shift starts with just simply even listening to this conversation. This training and conference that Henry and I are part of in September, a lot of what we're talking about is actually going to move into that space, as we talk about meeting people where they're at. It really is about deciding that, what I learned before was working for a period of time. We're not going to even say it's failed concept. I believe even the people who have developed all of the approaches that we were utilizing early in our career, I mean, people don't know what they don't know, right? Just like we give grace to ourselves, we give grace to the folks who put us in these spaces. Now that we know, though, it's the intentional work of undoing, unlearning, and now relearning,
Yeah,
and showing up in spaces like this to be engage in these conversations with your colleagues. Talk about some of the language used. I challenge people with the word resistance now. It's simple stuff. When people tell me that, or they share that was something they reflected in a note, I ask them what brought you to that conclusion. Helping people dig a little bit deeper inside of their thought process. How can we get to this space? How does it we remove performance? Is by doing. And this platform, this whole podcast is a doing for us. It's a doing. How do we get people who constantly say, how do you have this relationship? How do you even talk? Well, we got to show people. Okay, let's stop talking about it. Let's show. So it's the doing. It's the doing. You know, Henry, as we talk about what's keeping us free, how we move, and without being performative, and as we think about our audience today, what's something that you would want the listeners to sit with? Henry's a good sit with person. If you ever you know, talk to Henry and you asking questions about what's to do, what should you do, what's next, I promise you, in that first 10 minutes, you're gonna be sitting with something. Okay, so when I think about this, what is it a challenge that you would want our listeners, our audience, and as they move around and as people join in the weeks to come, because they'll go back and watch this, what's something that you want them to sit with?
yeah. Give me 1 second. I'm just looking something up.
I told y'all you're gonna be sitting with something. It might be heavy. The weight might be there, but you can carry it.
Well, I looked up the word freedom just to see again what our guy Webster says, and it says the power or right to act, speak, or think as one wants without hindrance or restraint.
Mm,
And freedom can come in a lot of ways. Like I'm free for the most part in my life. I can go wherever I want to, but my mind sometimes tells me that I'm not good enough,
mm,
or I'm unworthy, or who do I think I am? That's not freedom.
right.
right? I get home, I want a snack. I eat a whole bag of chips. I don't even think about eating a whole bag of chips until the bag's empty.
Right.
And I ain't even sat down. I've just been standing up over the pantry, shoveling chips in my mouth. And I know it's silly, but that's not freedom,
Right.
right? And I cut off all my social media. So I'm no longer on social media because I wasn't feeling a sense of freedom. I was comparing, I
Mm-hmm.
was judging, I was trolling, I was in everybody else's, business and reflecting on where I'm at versus where they're at. I just wasn't free. My heart wasn't free. My emotions wasn't free. My mind wasn't free. And all of those things was really messing with my spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Everything has a consequence. And one thing that I know to be true for me is I'm trying to keep my spirit. I'm trying to keep that flame going inside of me. And if anything hinders that flame, dampens that flame, it tries to smolder that flame,
Let's go.
it's got to go,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's got to go. And so I said it earlier and I'll say it again. You know, the most important freedom is freedom of the mind because everything else, our emotions, our spirit, our thoughts, our beliefs, it all comes from the mind. It
Mm.
all starts in the mind. And one of the best places to start is sharing what's going on in your mind with people that you trust and people that are around you. And then, usually, once I can do that, I start to get clarity and I can see things a little bit better so that I can take this action, like you mentioned, Shrita, so I can really liberate myself. I had a friend, she lives in Florida. She's a healer, she's incredible. I love her so much. And she was doing some work and she was working with a shaman, and shaman said,
Mm.
um, "You're locked in a prison that you have a key to that you've locked,
Mm.
but if you check, the door is actually open."
Mm.
So it's tough to get to that place of making hard decisions, I think, for ourselves when we have to let people go, substances go, quit jobs, like, whatever that is, to get back to like that freedom. But the best place to start is the people in your life that you trust and that you love and seek guidance so that you know that the path that you're on is the path that you're ultimately going to be taking for yourself.
That is excellent. You know, I really hope everyone can get a chance to really self examine all of these concepts, the concept of recovery, how it applies in your life, concept of freedom in recovery and how that applies, and look at those definitions. Those definitions have blown me away. When you sit with this conversation, even if you're not a professional in this field, think about yourself and look at the amazing work you've done thus far in your own recovery and healing and transformation, and acknowledge that in this space. Recovery isn't just isolated to substance use disorder. It is anything that you are disconnecting from that no longer serves you. And those definitions in Webster are absolutely true. So as you walk away this week and you really think about your journey over the month of July, as we come back around and bring some guests to further deepen this conversation, and we hope to see you join us. We want to just remind you that when we're talking about living unbound, by any means, being a part of this ecosystem of the recovery world. We're not just recovering from others, we're recovering from our self inflicted harms and recovering from a system that did not do as well. So,
Let me share this last thought. Right, when we talk about freedom, it's so important for you. And I'm speaking to our audience, and I'm speaking when I say you, I mean you, me, and the team behind the scenes, the audience. Here's why freedom is important. It's important for you to find freedom so that you can go back and help to liberate others. Because that is the only thing that's going to have the necessary, profound impact
that's
to
it.
help other people truly find who they are within themselves.
That's perfectly said. Thank you for that, Henry. Henry, that was a mic drop. We want to thank you all for joining us today. As you see, we're cutting our time down. We're getting close to an hour. We got some feedback that, people like sticking to that hour. We lose some guests towards going after the hour. So we appreciate you guys. We look forward to seeing you again here in 2 weeks, right, Henry? What's the date for 2 weeks from now? That is the 24th.
Yep.
So it was good chatting with you today,
It
friend.
was so good to be with you, sis. I'll see you next time.
See you
Take
next
care,
time.
y'all.
See you guys.